I'll call the November 8th Board of Selectmen meeting to order. We'll have one change to the agenda to help accommodate council getting back off island. Under Selectmen's reports and comments, we'll just move number 3 right after. We'll switch number 2 and 3. Other than that, we'll accept the agenda by unanimous consent. Announcements?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This meeting is being video and audio recorded, and we have a series of announcements, some of which we've been doing for a little while now. First off, we're going to have a quick update from our sewer director about the status of a couple of our current ongoing sewer projects.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Quite a bit to report tonight. The Tashma Lane and McLean Lane sewer project, they've completed it today. They did all the inverts and all the manholes, and they brought all the riser covers to the surface to finish grade. So Tashma and McLean are now at the next stages will be to get all the letters out so we can activate that one section. So that one has moved along very well. It's all been temporary paved, and that's some good news on that one. We did 212 feet on Vesper Lane today. We're within 30 feet of the intersection of Somerset. They'll be going through the intersection tomorrow, putting a new manhole in, and continuing up under Hummock Pond towards Meadowview. The crew that does the inverts and the manhole risers will be leaving to Tashma Lane tomorrow morning and going over to Vesper and starting that process on there. The C Street bypass this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, we were down there. We had a company come in from the mainland and install what's called a line tap. They come in and they actually tap the main and plug it as it was live, which I had never seen done before. It was pretty nail-biting to see them drill a 16-inch hole and a 16-inch pipe to take and put the tap in and the seal. Everything went very well. We had the bypass all in and off the road by 5 o'clock Saturday night. And then Sunday morning, we went back down around 11 o'clock and cleaned up the rest of the road, pulled the trench box out of the road. And yesterday, they finished the bypass piping, and today they installed all the pumps and the controls. And tomorrow, hopefully, we're going to do a trial run on bypass tomorrow morning. So C Street's moving along very well. And the Surfside project, we ran into quite a few snags today. I'm a little dirty. I just got out of a ditch. They pulled our water service out of the middle of the plant this afternoon, and we've been trying to get that solved. So, but other than that, the sewer projects are going very well. And we did 105 feet on Green Meadow today as well. That project's been going along. So and I'm on the job every morning just speaking with the neighbors and everything. Everyone seems to be pretty happy so far, and it's going along well. Good job. So, thank you.
Thanks, David. We have DPW is sponsoring a landfill groundwater monitoring forum tomorrow night, Thursday night, at 6:30 here in this room. Veterans Day observance will be held on Saturday, November 11th at 10:30 at the Federal Street War Memorial next to the town building. If it's raining, it will be held at Legion Hall, and also town offices are closed this Friday, November 10th. Torrance Beach Boat Ramp is closed until January 15th. The annual town meeting warrant for 2018 is now open for citizen warrant article submittals until November 20th at 4. And as we have a special town election on November 28th from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. in connection with the fire station supplemental appropriation. And we thank the voters. That was approved at town meeting on Monday. I can hardly remember that far back. That's it.
And I just wanted to comment on how nice the memorial looks, thanks to Erica and the Girl Scouts. It looks really amazing for the parade. This is the public comment portion of our agenda. If there's something you wanted to bring to our attention that's not otherwise on our agenda, now is the time. Hearing none, I don't believe there's any new business. And we will move on to approval of minutes, warrants, and pending contracts. Minutes from September 13th and November 2nd.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimously. Approval of the payroll warrants and treasury warrants.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Approval of pending contracts. Does anyone have questions on the contracts?
I just have a comment. I applaud the DPW for engaging in a strategic planning process. I know the Department of Health has done that, and as you know, the Board of Selectmen is actively engaged in pursuing the same.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Consent items, we have a gift acceptance for the fire department.
Move to accept.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Citizen departmental requests. We have something from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I believe maybe Tucker. Are you here to represent that?
Hi, Tucker Holland, Housing Specialist, and Brian Sullivan, the chair, is on his way here, so he may join us shortly. But I can proceed. The trust fund had voted at two recent meetings to make recommendation to the Board of Selectmen regarding the use of a portion of the $1 million allocation that came in 2016, I believe. And you all will remember that these funds.
Sally, this is you.
Hi.
For the record, Brian Sullivan. Where are we at?
Just
the beginning.
Introduce
Yeah.
again.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So after the last meeting that I attended the Board of Selectmen, there was a presentation put forth for funding for Wait Drive, which was unanimously voted for by the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to fund the $400,000 request. So that's attached here. And then included in this was, as I discussed it the last time I was here, the $150,000 grant that we wanted to award to Habitat for Humanity. So, other than that, if you have any questions.
Well, just a comment. I would just sort of for some history. There's, the board, Affordable Housing Trust Fund, has been discussing for some time, and I think that was, at least from a former board, some expectation that some of the funds would be used for the Wait Drive development, and I think that makes sense. So.
I'll comment. I think the expectation was more than 400,000. I think the ask was higher than that. I think the expectations on Bobby's part, at least, and most likely on Rick's, was it would be a higher number than is available. I understand Habitat's need, but I'm still waiting for a draft plan of that. I'm not so sure we should be. I'd like to kind of have an idea how many home ownership should we be giving away. The land is limited, and I understand it's a great opportunity. And Tucker can probably answer this, but I just am uncomfortable. I see what are we going to do there and how are we going to do it.
No.
I just don't like stepping forward.
I don't think this is an additional lot request.
This is related to a lot we've already
No,
granted.
already
I understand.
have.
I understand.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, it is.
Just on
I'm
the.
just keeping the pressure on.
Just on the, that's fine. With regard to the $1 million, as someone who's like kind of central in that discussion, my understanding originally was the intent was if there were funds needed to go primarily toward infrastructure type improvements to make possible the Six Fairgrounds development, that was really how those funds were earmarked. And so I think the trust, consistent with that intent, looked at the roadway, and approximately 1/3 of Wait Drive relates to servicing actually both Six Fairgrounds Road and the single-family home lots across the street, including Habitat, and then future ones that we'll come back to discuss, that the trust felt it would be very appropriate to basically underwrite or recommend using a portion of those funds toward that first third of the road. Beyond that first third of the road, the town may have other uses that have nothing to do with affordable housing, and the Affordable Housing Trust Fund can only allocate funds toward infrastructure that supports affordable housing, if that makes sense. So that's the logic behind it.
Okay, so will the trust segregate the 600,000 for future roads if affordable housing is put there, or will the voters have to come up with another $600,000? You see my question?
So I think at the time, I know that 600,000 was, but that was before we had any good numbers about there was just a number pulled out of the air. So now we have, I thought, a pretty reasonable concept of 1.2 or whatever. And I think that some of the logic of that 400 flowed from that as well.
Yeah, well, we knew that the road was going to be $1 million plus. That was the number that we were quoted when we put $1 million there, saying, geez, it'd be great to have it there and have it available for the road if needed, and for other infrastructure if needed, depending what the bids were. So I just see it slightly differently. I see that the money was put there with handcuffs on it for a specific reason, which the Affordable Housing Trust Fund doesn't necessarily agree with. And that's fine, and the vote, and you can see how the vote's going, but I just want to voice that the understanding here at the board and the vote that was made, and I was the swing vote on it to make sure it was passed. It wouldn't even have passed. It would have been 3-2 against, and the funds wouldn't even have been expended. But the swing vote in the vote we did was to put the handcuffs on it to make sure it didn't go to other uses. So, I understand what's going to happen, but I just need it on the record. Thank you.
And if I can, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I was just going to say that there was significant discussion about a good portion going towards the roadway and infrastructure. I think that your logic of it being 1/3 is reasonable. And when I voted for it, I was on board with the infrastructure, but I also wanted the trust fund to have money to go towards other things and creation of more affordable housing. So I'm on board with both requests. I just wanted to say that.
And I just was going to add that in the original discussion, and obviously I can't know what is in any individual's head, but my impression was that if, for example, the developer had come and said, we need $500,000 or up to $1 million to put in roadway actually on the site of the property as well, like towards some infrastructure that serviced the development itself, that was, let's say, a possible use of those funds. We made it very clear during the whole RFP process, don't come to us for money. We're trying to protect those funds really for the reasons that the chair just cited. So,
And I'd just like to comment that, having come to the last meeting that I was here, we heard very clearly the request to help participate in funding the road. The request was made. We reacted quickly and responded, favorably to the request. We want to work with this board to continue processes and get to a place of creation, and so that's why it's included. So, thank you.
Any other comments?
None from other than I would agree with you, Dawn, that I think the 600,000 that is left. I don't think in future it makes sense to me to have the Affordable Housing Trust Fund holding money for infrastructure when our role is to be creating houses. And I think the third, it's logical, and I'm definitely in support of both requests as well.
My only comment then is we have to look closely. Are the funds that are expended by the Affordable Trust Fund creating new houses or not? And and that's for a conversation for a different time. And are the funds that are expended there, going to come back to us and used efficiently? And so, those are big issues. And I know that you guys are trying to tackle them, but that was some of the concerns from what had happened 4 or 5 years ago. And so I just think that we just have to be cognizant that this money doesn't come from out of the. This isn't like extra money. We've got some tight budgets, and this is, we want to make sure we're getting our biggest bang for the buck. So
Understood.
yeah.
So I'd like to make a motion that we approve the recommendation for the $400,000 for infrastructure of Waite Drive, 150 to Habitat, and I'd like to add, if the board would go along, that we'd encourage the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to focus their efforts on increasing affordable housing inventory.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Selectmen's reports and comments. We have the Green Lady.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Michael Wilson. I am joined by Attorney Adam Fine on behalf of the applicants, Nicole and Rupert Campbell, and the Green Lady Dispensary Incorporated. This is a follow-up from the October 4 hearing where we're requesting you consider the request for a letter of non-opposition and approval of the community host benefit agreement. We have a slide presentation that I think is responsive to what we perceive to be the board's questions and concerns last time. I have an additional document that I would like to pass out that was not able to make it in, but it addresses specifically Mr. Kelly's question about potential need, and this is from the Massachusetts Patient Advocacy Alliance, and the author of this.
I think that was sent around.
Was it sent around? So they're an advisory position.
Their letter of support.
They're an advisory role on the Cannabis Control Commission.
I think we might have received an email from them late in the day today, and so we
Great.
we weren't checking for packet items after probably
No, I
Thursday.
know, but
I received some.
I received.
Great, thank you. Well, I have hard copies as well.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having us back, taking the time to hear about the Green Lady. And I also want to thank you for all the hard work I've seen all of you put in over the last couple of weeks at the forums that you've been holding, at the town meeting on Monday night. So I see personally you're all putting in a lot of work and of time and effort into this topic that we're going to talk about tonight. So, some of the things we wanted to talk about was the actual property, 11 Amelia Drive. The exterior of the main building on 11 Amelia Drive will remain the same and unchanged. Patients will not be permitted into the structure. They will not go up the front door. No one, not employees, not patients, will be using the front door. The only reason that it's there is an emergency exit. And all doorways in the entire structure, two structures, are all secured with key cards, so different people will have different security clearance to get into different buildings. People who work in the dispensary will only ever be in the back building and not even be able to get into this main building, so it's very limited who can get into this front building here. And it acts as a natural barrier to what's behind it. Overview map here shows again where the proposed dispensing facility is in the back. So there is no direct line of sight from Amelia Drive to the dispensing facility. There are no residential homes on that side of the road or in the area. And you can see the Nantucket Police Department and the future fire department are right behind the property. Couldn't be a more secure neighbor to have there. And also, the dispensary presently is handicapped accessible with a handicap ramp, and it has 7 existing parking spaces for patients.
Good evening, Madam Chair. I'll be handling this slide and a few other, the remaining slides. So we just wanted to talk a little bit, that was raised last time, kind of the location and how it fits in kind of with zoning. So just wanted to hit a...
Could you just say your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. Adam Fine on behalf of Green Lady. So thank you for having us back, Madam Chair and members of the board. This slide is just to kind of show that 500-foot range setback. That is what that green circle indicates. And we can assure you that we are, at least I can assure you as a lawyer, but hopefully town council can support me, that we are within the correct zoning here. Where it's been zoned, we had the passage at a town meeting of codifying this with great clarity, and we are not 500, we are 500 feet away from any state, more than 500 feet away from any state certified school or state licensed daycare center. We would have to go through, this is just the beginning of the process, so the letter of support or non-opposition is not a zoning permit of any kind. We still have to go to it says special permit from the zoning board of appeals. That's actually incorrect. It would be the planning board. And we would have to go through all the criteria to get a special permit. So this is by no means any kind of final zoning determination. One of the things kind of to focus, I think we mentioned it last time, a couple points worth highlighting again. This is, Green Lady is committed to being environmentally friendly. This is actually a mandate of the new marijuana law that the lawmakers recently passed. They're going to have a committee that's going to talk about kind of environmentally friendly standards. They'd like to be progressive and be ahead of the curve on this, and that involves LED lighting, collection and recycling of water, and reducing energy consumption, particularly electricity. And then also, I think it's worth repeating that this would be, if we're fortunate enough to get the letter of support of non-opposition and finish the application process, which we're confident if we can do, barring the hurdle tonight, that this would be the first minority-owned and woman-owned dispensary in the Commonwealth. That's actually a mandate from the Cannabis Control Commission to encourage diversity and inclusion in the marijuana industry. It's a problem nationally, so this would be a really kind of a great thing that would match the mission and purpose of our new law, our marijuana law that passed recently. Next slide. Okay, go.
So some exciting news is the HDC actually saw the plans for the building, I think it was 2 weeks ago, and they approved the plans. So that's some exciting news. The left side, my left, is the layout that it is existing, and the right side is the proposed first floor, which is actually the dispensary, which is in the dentist's office in the back. I'm going to try to use this. That's the ramp right there. And those are the stairs that go up to the front door. There's going to be a bank teller's window in right there. So before people ever enter the building whatsoever, they have to go up to the bank teller's window and they have to show their IDs. They have to show their ID that they're over 21, and they have to show their medical marijuana card. Once they look through the bank teller's window and they confirm this, then they are allowed in to this waiting room right here. That also has a door that is locked right here, so they can only enter the waiting room. In the waiting room, they are then checked into the computer system to verify, again, their age, that they're over 21, and that they have the medical ID card. After they go through the second check, then they're allowed through this door into the dispensary here. So this is the area where then there will be a consultant that can help them choose the right product, give them advice. It's private. I don't know the details yet about Massachusetts, but I know in other states, at the counter when they're checking out, they have to get ID'd again. So it's 3 times that they get ID'd.
Just a quick question, how many people at once are in that section?
Do you know the answer to that?
What's the legal?
So it would be up to local kind of zoning as to how many people for the use. Typically, municipalities look at it as a medical kind of office use, so kind of in compliance with the fire standards, and also this could be kind of self-regulated. So to the extent you wanted to have less people, you could do that. You don't want to have people accumulating in the waiting room, but it would depend on how many counters. And it looks like there's 4 counters, so you'd have good kind of flow of patients going in and out.
I got you. Because I originally understood that it was sort of one at a time or something, but it isn't.
Well, the ones that I've been at, they only allow you in if there is a person to help you. So you're never allowed in to just stand around or look around or browse or whatever. So if there is an available person to talk with you and help you, then you're allowed in. If there's no one available, then you're kept out until there's someone to help you.
Right.
So you don't wander around and they're alone.
And is that the same? Do they do the same thing in most places with retail as
Yes.
well?
Yes. Okay. Again, they keep you in the waiting room.
Right.
And only when there is a specific employee, an agent, to help you with your questions, your concerns, and so forth, do they allow you in. So if you have one person working there, there's one person allowed in.
I got you. Mm-hmm. And I'm bringing that up on the camera because that's something for us to think about. If in fact we do retail, and then we have to be thinking if it's very popular, they'll be queued up like the juice bar. So you have to make sure that we've figured out how to handle that in a way that doesn't hurt the neighborhood or anything else. It's just, I see Andrew here. It's just something I thought about, knowing how busy this will be. How do they queue up and what will the hours, your days and hours be for the medical?
We haven't decided upon that yet.
Do you think the state will indicate those? Or is that going to be a local level
It's a
control?
local level decision, so
It's the planning board that will condition
Hours?
special permit as the permitting authority on this.
Yeah, okay.
The one thing that I have noticed is, since you're looking ahead, new things, people are interested in new things. But after a while, it's not that exciting anymore, and it's not queued up any longer. It kind of loses its interest for people. So eventually it'll be that way, I think.
Yeah. I'm guessing that the medical isn't going to be queued up. I'm guessing the retail in the heat of the summer will be queued up. So depending on how many we have. And from the articles I've read from Aspen and places like that, so.
It's nice in this instance that because it's in the building behind the larger building and there's a big parking area. There's
Yeah, no,
a
it's
space that's kind of out of view.
Out of view again, yeah. And with security, all the areas with doors going to the back rooms are locked. So there's no way that a patient or anybody let in could just help themselves and walk in the back. All employees have key cards. All doors close, lock, and to get through them, you have to get through. And there's a lot of details. For instance, there's a prep area here and an office area here. Some of the rules are very well thought out. For example, you're only allowed to have in there what you assume will be used in that day. You can't have any extra stock kept in this building. So you assume, what are you going to use during the day? That's all that's in there, nothing extra. So these are some of the other buildings. The one on the left has a processing area, a commercial kitchen. That's the processing area. This is going to be the commercial kitchen. This is a room dedicated to trimming and curing the product. Over here is a downstairs area that's dedicated to cultivation. On this side is the basement of the facility. That's another area dedicated to cultivation. And I think the previous slide was missing. There's a basement under the dispensary, the dentist office. That's another area for cultivation. So altogether, there's going to be 4 cultivation areas in there of about 3,000 square feet. Let's see. This is the second floor. This second floor area is more growing area, more cultivation area. Up here are the storage areas, which they call vaults. They literally are described as vaults. That's where you keep the majority of your product. And the security is so tight that only few people are allowed in there with the key card, and they can never be accompanied by themselves. They always have to have a second person coming in with them. So they think about all these details. And then there's an office up here. And there is an attic, which would just be storage space.
I have another question. Will you guys have a lab to test the products that you're doing?
That's the recommendations that we're waiting for from the Cannabis Control Commission.
Yeah, it's a very timely question because I just sat down with the principal of MCR Labs to ask a precise question. So on his thoughts. So there is a way to do this and do it that will be compliant with the Board of Health here, who does not want us, wants us to stay with the testing requirements of the state, even if the CCC was going to give some kind of mitigation for Nantucket. We want to have the highest testing standards. So we're working with MCR Labs, and there's other labs, but they're kind of the leader in the Commonwealth right now, to figure out a way that we can do the testing, hopefully not have to send any of the cannabis. The sample sizes will be so small that it won't be detectable. And I'm not a scientist, but he described a methodology that seems to be workable. It will likely involve Green Lady making a small commitment to purchasing some equipment on site, but not the full, 6-figure lab equipment. Something to a smaller degree, and then allow the sample size to be de minimis and still do kind of robust, adequate testing. So that's the plan. But there'll be more to come, and we'll be sitting down with the Board of Health.
Would they be able to test for on-island growers?
Yes, that is the goal, because that's the challenge, that we're restricted to growing on island, and also with the federal waters issue, international waters actually, and the Coast Guard enforcement, that really product should not be transported from the mainland to the island or vice versa. That needs to happen. So that's the goal, to do testing on island for cultivators and any retailers.
Right, and that's why I'm asking. I had a couple friends of mine, do this, and their concern was they wanted an on-island lab in case the rules for a cooperative are positive. If the rules for a cooperative make sense, they want to be able to test it here, not have to send everything off and send it back. So that was just a question. So that would be something you think?
Yeah,
you
I
would be
think
able
so.
to do?
And one of the things I sat down with Mike O'Connor, the principal of MCR Labs, and it is a volume business for them, so the economics start to work, and their by sample size, it's not a lot of money. It's $30-$40 a sample or whatever. But crafting a way to make the economics work, maybe with a little bit of supplementation or helping it with the Green Lady. I think we're going to come up with a solution, and that's what we'll work on the Board of Health with.
I think these are all the plans. Does anybody have any questions about the floor plans at all? Okay. It's by the way, it's a large building. We're very lucky. The building is about, I think, almost 7,000 square feet, which is very hard to find on Nantucket. I'm speaking to the choir. You guys know this. And you really do need that amount of space to do all these various things. It's a space-intensive project. Okay, so one of the topics that was raised last week was about edibles and packaging. So this slide is actual quotes from the existing medical marijuana law, and it states any edible MIP, which is a marijuana-infused product, that is made to resemble a typical food or beverage product must be packaged in an opaque package that labeled as required according to the code. So that's an example. For instance, those bottles there are very popular. They're the same ones that pharmacies use. And being opaque, they either come in black or white. So you cannot see what's inside of them. You wouldn't even know it was food necessarily. Marijuana, in this case, including MIPS, shall be packaged in plain, opaque, tamper-proof, and child-proof containers without depictions of the product, cartoons, or images other than the RMD's logo. That's the dispensary's logo. Edible MIPs shall not bear a reasonable resemblance to any product available for consumption as a commercially available candy. So that's a very good thing to address, which was a question last week. You cannot make gummy bears, candy corn, because it looks like products that are already commercially available. So it cannot mimic current existing product, which is a good thing.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
And they had to go backwards in a couple other states because the producers all did mimic that, and there was some severe problems with it. So.
This is an actual bottle from an actual dispensary. I think you know more about it.
Yeah, sure. So this is an example of what kind of the labeling looks like. We talked about kind of lab testing. This is from a dispensary. I believe it's one in Brookline. Just wanted to show it as a representative sample to the board to see the level of detail. And actually, we could probably expect when the new rules come out, we may even see more detail here. But that's listing the THC content. Provide a whole bunch of information about the compounds, the cannabinoids within there, and the batch. Everything is tracked seed to sale, so we know which batch it is. If there were to be any problems or a recall, we haven't seen recalls in the state, but if that happens, there's an ability to track the batches. Everything is tracked seed to sale, and then the packaging date. And there also is, we aren't showing it here, there'll also be patient information similar to how you would see on a normal prescription. So just wanted to, I know there were some questions last time about kind of what the labeling requirements are, and this is it in a nutshell. And there is a clear requirement to keep in bold print or capitalization, keep this product away from children. And that's obviously part of what the educational process will be for new patients, is to really remind them of this, that this is like any other medication and they need to keep it away from children. So that was labeling. This is advertising. This is a concern that often comes up. The last thing I think anybody wants to see is a big marijuana leaf neon sign. That's see that on TV in California. We don't have that in the Commonwealth. We never will. And these are the regulations in place. And so really the signage across the Commonwealth is it's almost, you almost don't notice it. It's going to be a very small sign. You can go kind of more detail, but it will comply with any of the local signage requirements you have. But most likely, this is going to be more restrictive than any of the signs that you have. But Green Lady wants to fit into the character and kind of culture of Nantucket, and that means no neon. That means very minimal signage, and that's exactly what we'll have, and that's what we're required to have under state rules.
That's a positive. Yeah. Another story from Aspen. They have small signs. They're only loud, tiny signs. So that's Joe's Pot puts Joe's Hamburger next to it in a huge sign. So they're trying to figure out how do you control them naming another business ancillary and right next door, because they're allowed to do that. So people are finding the angles. It's kind of funny.
A quick question on the advertising. What's the balance between you having a successful business and be able to advertise in the paper, flyers around town, right, versus what we can control locally? Do we know that? Is that something that you know?
Yeah, it's a great question. So right now the advertising restrictions are very, very strict. And there's constitutional questions because it runs against the First Amendment. And so the Cannabis Control Commission right now is actually working on those regulations for recreational marijuana. But right now we see, up until very recently, in fact, the rule change went through today, you weren't even allowed to advertise pricing on your website, which patients didn't like because in order to figure out, they would have to travel a great distance to figure out what the price is and then maybe find out it's too expensive. It doesn't work for them. So it's been very slow to allow more advertising. My sense is, and this is just my sense, having been doing this since the end of 2012, is that there's real no appetite, at least from the industry, to expand advertising. There hasn't been a need to, really, frankly. I mean, there's been a lot of demand. And I think we have 45,000 patients and maybe 16 dispensaries open. We just aren't serving the patients well right now, so that hasn't been an issue. But my guess is this will come to the fore as supply kind of gets closer to demand.
It's been pretty restricted with medical for years.
Yes,
and nothing. Something may change. Recreational comes along, or we don't.
Yeah,
know.
I mean, the indications are, and I sat down with one of the two of the commissioners last week, that they have a good roadmap with medical. So what I've been telling my clients is we can take medical and expect something more stringent. That's my opinion, and frankly, that's what a lot of the industry is advocating for, because we don't need it. I mean, will there be outliers that are going to push the limits? Gamesmanship with this Joe's, restaurant right here. I guess so. That certainly occurs in other states. I'll speak for Green Lady. It's not happening with Green Lady. So
thank you.
The one on the bottom left is cut off a little bit, but I think that's handy too. You're not allowed to use pictures or illustrations, for example, cartoons or anything that appeals to anyone under 18 years of age. So that one stuck out to me. You can't come up with a character that will appeal to a young child and use it in any way. So I thought that was good, as an example. And community support.
Sure. So we have a long slideshow. This is, I believe, the end of the slideshow, because the rest of the slides are from the last hearing. We're happy to revisit them if you'd like, but really just kind of wanted to sum up, which is we're here today to get the letter of support of non-opposition. This is a thing Green Lady needs to move forward. We're not going to be licensed, even when we're provisional licensed. It doesn't mean we can sell to patients yet. We have to go through a rigorous process with DPH, and then we have to get through the planning board. But this is a hurdle, and hopefully that we've met this threshold. And I think, tonight, I think one thing which was a good thing from the last hearing was it allowed us to kind of address some of the concerns of the board and go back and really engage the community. And the Green Lady did a kind of really great job, I think, doing that over the last several weeks. And what we heard, and hopefully the board has heard this as well, is that patients really want access here on the island. I think it's actually been remarkable. I watched I didn't have the pleasure of being on island, but I watched the forum, and I also watched the town meeting. And so we heard, which we don't hear really in a lot of other places necessarily in the Commonwealth, that there really is a desire to see not only medical, but actually recreational law kind of implemented here. And so I think, and we've garnered over the last several weeks, and before then, just a lot of support, I think grassroots legitimate support, and we presented some of that here tonight via letters of support. I believe Michael actually has.
I have 36 here. I was just trying to put a couple of the direct abutters on the top. I'll pass them down to Erica. They reference the location in their form letter, but they're people who would have an interest in this particular location, specifically across the street, directly next door, residential, commercial, and members of our community. We're not.
And one thing to add, because I know Mr. Kelly specifically had the question, we really wanted to get an answer for you, Mr. Kelly, about the demand issue. It's protected information, and we weren't able to obtain it. What I did do is have a conversation with Nicole Snow at the Mass Patient Advocacy Alliance and talk to her about it, and she was unequivocal that really one wouldn't be enough on the island, and so whether so we believe that we don't want to restrict patient access. We're here to we're not here to be protectionists. We're here to, if there's other good actors and you want to let them in, that's great. But we want to be able to serve patients as quickly as possible. I said the Green Lady, really not me, but the Green Lady, and I think they have a really good plan to do it, and I think they can execute it quickly. So I think that will really meet kind of the patient needs here, and I think it's a remarkable speed. We represent a lot of clients in the space, and they may have the record in terms of getting the property under agreement, getting their funding, doing their design. It's really kind of been pretty remarkable. So I would encourage the board to issue a letter, or we're certainly available to answer any questions that you have.
I'll just make a comment. I appreciate. I think one of my concerns, in addition, was the impact on the neighborhood, and maybe I shouldn't, but I'd liken it to the conversations we've had about liquor stores, year-round liquor stores, and reasons for and against them, and I was really struck, was very powerful, all the letters of support from your neighbors, and so that, and I appreciate you taking the time to do that. That meant a lot to me. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank you as well for, I appreciate the effort to address the board's concerns from the last meeting. I feel, based on the conversations and discussions that have come up over the past couple of weeks in regards to recreational, I'm comfortable issuing a letter of support, and I would make a motion to issue a letter of support to Green Lady.
I'll second that.
I mean, just before we take the motion, I just wanted to make one comment, and I really appreciate you looking into the schedule of the ballet studio and just offering to be closed when those children's classes are in session, and everything else that you've done.
Thank you.
On the motion, okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So much, everyone.
And if we want to talk more about marijuana, let's have a recap of the town meeting.
So I was just, when we talked about putting this on the agenda, we obviously weren't too sure what would happen. And so there were a number of articles called, and they had varying degrees of yes and no. The board's articles 1, 2, and 3 all passed. So those are going to, the first two, all of the zoning or other bylaw amendments, I guess it was just zoning, will now get compiled and sent to the Attorney General's office in accordance with Mass General Law. Ryan and I will be talking about the local option tax on the sale of recreational marijuana and working on a warrant article for the annual, as we have discussed. The real estate items, Andrew and Eric and I will work with Town Council's office on getting those underway. And I think that was kind of it for, we'll send in the home rule petition up. We had a general law acceptance. And I didn't know if there was any other things the board wanted to mention. We got a little bit of positive feedback on our flyer. Thank you, Florencia, for getting it together, and Jason and Rita for handing it out at Stop and Shop, and we had it around. So that seemed helpful.
Was that the flyer for the secret town meeting flyer? Is that the one?
Yes,
Okay.
because we didn't want anybody to know about it.
Why did
So
you hand
we
out
did
a flyer? I don't get it.
I don't know.
There were a lot of people who showed up for that secret meeting.
Yeah, it's surprising how it got out like that.
I think we've set a standard of, Rita and I stand outside Stop and Shop. There's only a couple hours on a Saturday, but we had some really good conversations, and a lot of people who know the town meeting is coming up. You just say, see you Monday, and I saw a couple, oh yeah. So I'm not saying we all have to be out there at the annual town meeting. Maybe we'll have to set something up if we have a quorum. But I thought it was good just to see selectmen out there in the public, reminding everybody about the town meeting.
As long as we don't have to be at the Rotary.
I don't think we'll be at the Rotary.
Or the dump. No, I think
great.
that was great.
Yeah.
And, that was really, Jason took the initiative on that, and it was a good effort.
That's the place to be. That's
Definitely got
good.
the word out.
Sorry, is it possible to quickly go back to item number 1? There was not a vote to execute the host community agreement.
Oh, okay. Why don't we does anyone have anything else to say about
We can just
town meeting?
add it to the motion if you want to.
Yep. So just adding to a motion for the letter of support, an approval of the host community benefit agreement.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Opposed, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And back, anything else for the town meeting recap?
No.
Downtown and town-owned parking lots, parking policy discussion. I think that there are some people here tonight that have some interest in this. I think that maybe Mike Burns had a few words to say. Maybe.
Do you want to talk about it as a board first, or get input from others, or how did you?
If you want to kick it off,
So I think my thought is that we spend a lot of time talking about how to implement something, how to operationalize it, sometimes getting into a lot of the weeds of it, because that's where I know I'm more comfortable. But I'm hoping we can have a discussion really about what the town's policy should be and what we're trying to accomplish with paid parking, assuming that that's the direction we're going in. And I know as we've been talking about an intermodal transit center, and maybe it's just coincidence, but I believe at the last board meeting, it was really the intermodal transit center that prompted the discussion, and the consultants we've hired for that prompted the discussion about, well, what should we do about paid or on-street or parking lot parking? And I guess as I've been thinking about it, I see, I hope we consider seeing it as one entire system, and which is hard to do. I understand, because we don't have an intermodal transit system or transit center. But I do know that my assumption is that some of the pro forma for the transit center could be assuming revenue from a lot of different parking sources, and I guess I'm hoping that I'm probably not making myself clear, but I really see paid parking or parking in general as one entire system, whether it's in a garage or in a town-owned parking lot or on Main Street. And as we go about this conversation, that's the filter I'm going to use as we kind of go through it.
I would agree, Jim, that it is all one system in the sense that everything's connected. So a parking garage could be built, and we could change nothing, and there'll probably be a lot of benefits. But are we missing out on other benefits? And as we've been looking at parking for 10 years, we've all read all the studies that's online. But are there any advantages now by having a parking garage to doing some form of paid parking, right? And the goals and the kind of the policies of the board that we could push by saying we would like 85% occupancy. Why? What does that mean? So for me,
something like that would be to increase turnover, so there's always a space for the businesses downtown, including the parking garage, including other things that are outside. So I'm not making myself clear.
No, you are. Actually,
But I do think it's all connected. And if we were going to charge a higher price to park right next to the curb of the restaurant that you want to eat at in July, there has to be a little further out, cheaper parking, and a little further out that's accessible, that's free. There has to be some kind of tier so you're not excluding anyone. But I do believe we are missing revenue for local services.
Well, I think that we're at the point with the level of traffic that we have on the island. It's probably the number one complaint, and a lack of funding for alternative. We don't have all the bike paths done that we want. We don't have all of the bus service that we could really use to accommodate things. That we've got to sort of come back to what's the value of parking and look at it. I mean, the intermodal center we're at the very beginning stages of discussion about that. That's a number of years off. All of the parking spaces that we have currently, we could be managing differently soon, to get some different programming going, try different things, see how they function. And I really envisioned this as a little bit of a broad discussion, and we'll narrow this down a little bit more over time, and get some direction from our planners.
And to what you were saying about the sort of the parking garage, a potential parking garage being longer term, that a lot of the other towns that have been putting in these intermodal facilities have already had paid parking management in place, and then the garage added to that. And I think looking at some of the studies that have been done and the data that they had on, when the peak hours are and the usage, the information's a little bit dated. And I think it would be important to look at the opportunities that putting in place a paid parking management system first, and then using that to help us figure out how many spaces we would actually need, if we do need them, and how to price them. And I do think that, some of these, I'm concerned about the seasonality, and looking for other examples of places where there is such a distinct seasonality. The one in Bar Harbor didn't go ahead, at least for the time being, and I haven't come across another town that has one with such distinct seasonality. So, and I think it's a lot of infrastructure, and we'd want to make sure that it would get used. But to echo Jim and Jason, I agree that I think all of it has to be looked at together. I think there's, as we try and put in a year-round bus service system, what impact would this have on our year-round bus service system, on our taxis? And I think we have to look at all of those together. So, and I don't know if Bar Harbor had their traffic solutions workforce, parking commission. We talked about parking commission. I do think it needs to be a priority, especially so that we can have some information to look at in comparison to what the consultants will come back with in regards to a garage.
I think some of this is done. I think some of the answers have been done for us from Nelson Nygaard's study from 2000 and what was that, 2011. 11 was pretty good, and it said guiding principles: encourage more activity in downtown, provide convenient parking for customers and clients, encourage efficient use of existing parking, improve ease of access for visitors, provide resident discounts, protect residential neighborhoods from spillover, accommodate employee parking in appropriate locations. Those are all, if you're saying like we want to be big picture, this study was written from a big picture standpoint. I think sort of the other big picture part, are we instituting demand management or not? Are we going to change it based on the demand? Are we going to change it? Is it going to, in this case, they were recommending, 3 hours free at lunchtime and charge more up until 8 at night, et cetera. And you weren't able to roll your car. They're recommending you don't roll your car any longer. If you stay within one zone, you stay within that zone. If you move, you're still in that zone. So, and they were recommending, some different changes on, on different fees and things. I think, it's market-based pricing. Are we valuing parking and going to do that? I think we absolutely have to do that. And so, and we've talked about a sticker system, which, that means different things to different people. Some people think a sticker means I can park downtown as long as I want, and there'll be an expectation that they get to go down and park under our existing rules. Well, I think the rules have to change. The places that are successful, you don't have your closest areas pay the most. The further apart areas pay the least. You can't expect people to go into a parking garage if they can park on street all day for free. And so I think, from that perspective, are we willing as a board to support that type of thinking and then direct staff to implement that over everything like Jim talked about? And I'm afraid if we just sort of go piecemeal, if we have a big picture, that would be great. And then we could implement it maybe piecemeal. But if we try to do it piecemeal, someone's going to be upset. I've been at this 20 years. Someone's going to be upset that they can't park where they've always parked, or they have to pay now, or something else. And this board or a next board or the board after will get tripped up and will backslide. I think it's really important that we kind of have the big picture in place and then start implementation. I don't see parking garages are not cheap. And, when you look, Newburyport was, and it hasn't been built yet, but it was estimated at $60,000 a space, I believe. Maine, it was estimated 2 years ago at $30,000 a space. What's it going to be here to build? It's not going to be cheap. And if you actually have a parking fund and put the money in there and do it properly, there's enough money to pay for all of this. If you don't have a parking fund, if you don't value the parking, we won't have the money to pay for any of it. It'll all be on the taxpayers, and they'll be, we'll get it halfway done. So I just think we need to, as a board, get on with it and not sort of, I don't know I'm not explaining it very well, but.
No, so this is a work in progress, and I think this is a great discussion as I've, listening into others. I think it makes sense to go ahead and, and implement something as soon as reasonably possible to generate revenue that's put aside for transportation purposes, if that's the will of the board. And also, and I don't know how to do this, but ask the planners to think about how this system may change if we ever have a parking garage. I mean, for example, do we want to have such a premium or high cost of on-street parking that it'll drive people to the parking garage? But we don't have, obviously we don't have one. So how do you plan for the implementation of a parking garage in this system at some point in the future? I think that just be something for the planning folks to be thinking about.
When you look at sort of read the articles and look at what happened at Bar Harbor, it is somewhat similar to us. There was discussion of a public-private partnership for a garage, and the neighbors in different factions there kind of couldn't agree on it, and there was a lot of dissension, and so that got set aside, and that was voted 5-0 by their planning board, and it was not supported by their council. That was set aside, and then they concentrated just on parking, and it lost by 4 votes. And so, there's a lot of work that has to be done, to do this, and I think, so anyway, that's.
Well, with that clear direction, might be interesting to hear from some others.
Yeah.
Mike, come up. Oh, Charlie, we're going to take Mike first, and then I'd love to hear from you.
No, I think if Charlie would speak to what the Civic League did. This is Mike Burns, transportation planner. Charlie going next and talking about the Civic League's efforts and surveying the community to get the community's impression of this type of what you're talking about now, paid parking management. I think it's going to be very helpful. There are some bullet-pointed questions that you were provided by the town manager. I think I tried to address those as best I could and sent those responses to you all about the steps that are needed in order to actually realize a system that's actually in place. Number one, you need a pricing mechanism. The community needs to accept what this the new municipal modernization bill authorizes as parking benefit district. I think one of the concerns some people might have is that any revenue generated from paid parking would just go to a general fund and be lost, but actually channeling that into improving the district and elements that help improve parking altogether, not just maybe sidewalk improvements, but also expanded transit service as a supplement to getting to downtown with a vehicle. It could fund things like a garage, depending on but I don't necessarily think that one is dependent on the other. You probably could implement parking management now, have paid parking now without a garage, and even with a garage, they would just work together. Just as Jim pointed out, there would be pricing mechanisms to encourage one or the other. The steps that I outlined, it's probably best to focus on the first couple of steps that are necessary. One is picking an actual pricing mechanism that you want, and that discussion goes back as long as I've been here, and probably before I got here. I mean, it's decades. The idea of metering and including meters on the sidewalk have been a little bit of a contentious issue. That's been addressed by an idea of permitting, allowing parking on street by permit, similar to the beach program that's in place. That's something that's been supported by the NPDC along with two other initiatives, using those revenues to fund the expanded NRTA service. Addressing concerns with parking capacity, Rita, we've done our diligence with studying and see what the deficiency is. I mean, it's probably in the thousands looking at zoning, and it's probably in the hundreds looking at other practical matters. The fact is, we're deficient in the parking supply, and adding a couple of few hundred spaces would go a long way to address that. And we can supplement that with providing satellite parking and addressing the demand there, so that we address some of the goals of these programs, and thus to encourage the economic prosperity of the downtown area and the merchants. Providing more patrons for the downtown, not necessarily competition or anything like this. So again, picking up on a pricing mechanism that's in place, whether you like the metering and charging per hour, going with a sticker program and allowing parking by permit, and realizing revenue from that stream, and keeping the existing time restrictions in place is an option. That the board should probably accept the legislation for parking benefit districts at the upcoming town meeting, so that mechanism is in place. The board should then probably, if it goes that route, actually form a parking benefit district and identify what that geography actually is.
How is that defined?
It's any area that's going to use those funds, basically. I would suggest to you that it would be everything inside of the residential parking permit district and the core district, and would also include some satellite parking lots as well. That would be your benefit district, and those areas would be benefited by NRTA service. You can improve the parking lots out of this fund.
Sidewalks?
Sidewalks could be any type of a nexus to parking. That's the legislation is very specific that it has to actually the revenues generated from parking have to go back into a parking related issue. If you improve a sidewalk on a street outside of the district, it's probably not going to be acceptable. Improving a sidewalk where there's no on-street parking at all outside of the core area is probably a questionable use of those funds. Marketing of the downtown area without addressing parking specifically is probably not a acceptable expenditure of those funds. But marketing of the downtown area and say, come park downtown because we have easy places to park, and and please take the bus if you want to. Those types of marketing strategies are acceptable uses of those funds. But those have all been outlined in the response to the town manager's questions, basically 5 different points that you can really get into the weeds on some of these issues. The entity that's actually going to manage this fund, that needs to be figured out. The actual pricing mechanism, whether it is a permit or you actually are acceptable to meters, that actually we need some direction on that from this board.
Here's a question on that.
Yes, sir.
You sent the stickers from Vienna, so instead of a license plate, they're scanning a sticker that's attached to a car. And that would be sort of a sticker program idea. Those would still work in a garage, correct?
That's the idea, and that's a new technology. And quite honestly, we could go with a permitting system now without a chip with a georeferencing type of ability at all, and just have that, and then you would actually know how many vehicles actually have a demand for. So you get some information out of that, but what you're talking about, this radio frequency identification chips that are in stickers, that's implemented in some communities. That could be merged with some kind of program with a parking garage that not only does it allow you access to downtown, not only do you get data from that sticker on utilization of on-street parking from that sticker because it is georeferenced, but it could also access, unlock a gate to the garage and raise the arms of the gates to actually get in. I mean, that's basically what RFID stickers are used for in a lot of other areas, is just to raise the arm to actually get into the lot. So there's definitely a symbiotic and it could carry over into other facilities, not just for.
And those can differentiate whether someone's a resident, has a resident sticker, or someone, downtown resident sticker or not. Like it's all coded in the sticker or colored on the sticker.
Exactly. And that's probably down the line. I think what I submitted in the response was actually a modification of the traffic rules and regulations for a permit. And the way that's envisioned is if you don't already have a sticker, if you're not a residential parking permit holder, if you're not a commercial permit holder for commercial parking, the catch-all is that you would have a downtown parking permit. So the idea is that essentially anyone that parks downtown would have some sort of permit on their vehicle. That could eventually be modified as technology evolves to go into a one-sticker system. Right. And that's really the limit. There is no limit to the technology and using that. You maybe get utilization of beaches. Set up sensors and see if there's actual vehicles on beaches at certain access points. There's really no limit to this. It's only, how do you want to limit it?
And you can adjust them by what time of year it is.
Exactly.
Like in January, maybe everything's free.
And exactly. And in the permit program that I had sent out here, and that was basically just for discussion. If that's something the board really wants to embrace, it's pretty simplified. It's very seasonal. And it mirrors the residential parking permit pricing program. And I think it's a pretty sticker-centric community. Everybody's used to getting a beach sticker, getting a residential parking sticker. I mean, it's kind of an accepted part of our culture, and that's why I believe the NPDC embraced that as an option, just because the metering systems are a different animal. It's another way of realizing revenue, and it gives you that ability of peak pricing. So there's nice abilities there, but it's just the infrastructure was a concern. So in order to address that concern, we looked at other options, and having a sticker, a user fee essentially to park downtown one time, just make me pay one time, not every single time I park downtown, kind of a mentality. That's why we push that as an alternative to a metering system. But really, there's no wrong answer. It's just what do you think would be acceptable to the culture of this community.
And my concern with just a one-time fee is you're setting up an expectation, and we're at some points of time, from 5 years ago, we were 110, 115% over capacity. What you want to do is set your supply and or your charge so you have 15% of any given street or any given area open at one time. That way, if someone's coming there, they can find a space easily. So those are that's what the parking commission would be working at. They'd be changing it quarterly so that would happen. They'd see which areas were in demand and they would adjust it. They'd adjust the price or adjust the time frames or whatever they'd have to do to keep things flowing. That's kind of how they work. And so the question, what I worry about is that what happens to somebody just came off the boat and pulls up on Main Street and they haven't got a sticker yet? Are they ticketed? Can they walk somewhere and get a sticker? Like, those are the questions that would have to be worked out. They should be able to. They should be able to walk up to a kiosk or get it at the steamship or somehow get it before
steamship, knowing online in advance to where you can order these things and have it mailed to you in advance. This is how they get their beach stickers now in the summer season, how they get their residential parking permits or temporary residential parking permits. Some folks just stay at a bed and breakfast in town or rent a house in town and have to get those. And there's already infrastructure in place for that. That's why it's not that huge of a leap to actually implement the program, I believe.
Mike, if the board as a priority said we'd like to have 50% open spaces, 85% occupancy, that's the goal. How would you do that in a sticker program, right?
I think what you're calling a parking commission that manages what the legislation provides you as a parking benefit district. The parking benefit district has to have a mission, has to have goals. So your mission would be to manage parking for a whole slate of economic development reasons. One of your goals would be to have a 15% availability of parking. That would be a goal. How you achieve that, it's all about data. If the sticker program was in place and there was an RFID system in place, you could measure that very, very easily. If it was metering programs, you can measure that very easily to just test your goals. Just having a general sticker with no other technology tied to it, that'd be a little bit more difficult. It actually provide more feet on the ground to actually survey the area. So that would be a discouraging element. Some people just may not want to buy a sticker, just think it's a hassle and just would choose another way, take a taxi or carpool, Uber, transit, bike, walk, use some other way to go downtown. And that's great. That's kind of the idea behind it. It's meant to be a soft cap. When the idea was originally proposed in 2006, that was the idea, is not to have a hard cap and limit the number of cars that are on island, but to have discourage and disincentives. And that's all the sticker would really do. But also create a revenue stream to actually fund some of these improvements that are just, you're having a hard time finding funding for, like expanded NRTA year-round, having a direct shuttle from the 2 fairgrounds parking lot to downtown. This will create that stream of revenue to fund that. And if there's funding left over, fund sidewalk improvements. And then that's the whole part of it. It's not just pricing for the sake of pricing, but you're going to kill a lot of birds with one stone. You're going to discourage, create more turnover, discourage single occupancy vehicles, and you're going to create a revenue stream just as a side effect of requiring a permit.
And I think reading through some of the system in Vienna, that they do have, like, there's different hours, there's residential permits, and then there's for visitors, you can get the temporary ones that you pick up at in any kind of store or shop.
You've looked into it. Thank you.
I have, yes. So it seems like, particularly, I think what struck me about the NYGARD study was that how much technology has advanced since then, and it seems like it's more possible to have some sort of sticker permitting technology-based system that doesn't require kiosks. I was reading LA has a system, they've put in a system where it's sort of real-time information on spots that are available, but they do have the sort of demand-based pricing. And I think the NYGARD showed us that Friday and Saturday evenings and then Saturday mornings are when we're over that 85%. And if there was a way to implement some combination of sticker, temporary, whatever system it is, to at least try and minimize or de-incentivize people driving in by having the higher demand pricing during those hours. And my only other question was, based on that NYGARD study, is how relevant or how much has the demand increased since then? Because they really highlighted the Friday, Saturday night, and the Saturday morning being over capacity, and the other ones were in sort of the 70% range. So 6 years later, how many more of those sort of time slots are closer to the 85% or over it? Do we know?
We surveyed the downtown a few different times. A lot of it's heavily dependent on if we have a summer assistance on that, and each year that we've counted it, there's really no difference. And we go out there basically between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock on a Friday and a Saturday just to count, and it's like at 105% capacity. You pick how many parking spaces the downtown has. You just make an assumption, 20 feet for a parking space. You can fit 4 cars in a street segment. Sometimes you can get 5 if it's a bunch of Jeep Wranglers, or 6 or 7 if it's smart cars. So it's a very, very stressed situation in the core area and getting into the residential parking permit district. And the numbers that each year that we do survey, those don't change. And quite honestly, we just don't survey at like 4 o'clock. We just didn't take data. We just went out 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock to do those surveys. But it's stressed every single time we have surveyed it. And so it hasn't gone down. Started to go much higher than 100%.
Yeah, that was what I was assuming, is that it would be going higher and higher. So I think in terms of going back to the number of spaces that were short, at NYGARD, they sort of, their numbers were somewhere between 98 and 600, and they sort of settled at around 300 spaces. during the peak hours. But again, now in the off-peak hours, like, have we increased 10%? Are more places regularly over that 100% or over the 85%? That would be my only question, is where are we now with how many spaces we're short throughout the day? But I would like to see some sort of really availing of the technology that's available to not need meters, but be able to generate revenue as well as potentially take advantage of.
Can I follow up on just the town has done a lot to increase capacity with valet options and with the park and ride options, and those are, we find every single year. I mean, two fairgrounds went from 40 or 50 cars now to like 80 cars. It's a heck of a lot more than 100 and. Gosh, the capacity now is 200 something spaces, so that's I don't really know what the valet utilization is, but I'm very sure that's extremely popular, and it's gotten more popular as the years go by.
It's been full this summer on a number of occasions, or it was full this summer.
So that's just illustrative of just the issue.
Yeah, out of town was 50 to 80 in the early years, and it was up over 150 or so on an average day this summer. When you go through and count on a sort of regular basis. So, and if you're at peak or you're over peak, you're not going to be able to, you can't put any more. We already put 10%, 15% more. The question is, has it, moved out into some other areas? And as the conversation we had a couple weeks ago on Sunset Hill, it has. And so we've got various areas are saying, geez, you need to help us. We need to be in the parking district. So I don't think it's grown as quick as the rate of homes. Every home represents 2-point-something cars. They might not be in that driveway, but they're somewhere else on the island. We're probably up around 25,000 peak season now, which is sort of our, and what's happening is exactly what was predicted to happen about 20 years ago. Old South is going to be gridlock, Surfside's going to be gridlock, into here's going to be gridlock. It was all on a computer. It's happening. So I think that's, and we have to make changes to adjust for that. So I think, I don't think it's not going to go away. I think we've slowed it a bit. I think what Mike's saying is actually right. Some of the things we've done is slowed it down there, but it's still pretty rough,
Jim, you had a question?
So this is a science fiction question.
All right.
As we've been talking to experts, like Desmond, the consulting firm that's going to help us out with the intermodal center, one of the things we've asked them to consider is the reuse of the intermodal center when garages, we don't need them because we're not relying on cars so much. So when's that going to happen? And when's it going to happen on Nantucket? Is my question. And then just, we all hear and I just know in San Francisco, for example, that the city is now looking at their parking spaces as what kind of reuse. So they're going to use their parking spaces. So there's now a company that's developed kind of pop-up structures for use because they're not used, because they have other means of transportation than cars now, and that's now become an asset for the city of San Francisco to derive some revenue from.
Are you asking when the autonomous vehicle is going to be a reality?
Whatever's going to happen. We're maybe riding drones. I don't know, but I just
The best I've heard from the experts who look at this very diligently is that none of us will be. Not every single person in this room is going to be using an autonomous vehicle soon. There will be, some services that might be autonomous, like say Uber or Lyft or something like that. A rideshare program may be autonomous, but quite honestly, the vehicles themselves might be just priced out of people's ability to pay. Subscriptions may be beyond what people are paying for some people, but that's still just to get to that. Some things are out there that are autonomous. Just to get to that stage, that's probably 2 to 5 years away, and I think we're probably even a generation or more beyond most of us using an autonomous vehicle.
So it's within the time frame of a lifespan of a building, but not necessarily within our driving lifespan.
I wouldn't say so. No, I wouldn't say that that's going to be just. I don't think that the life. If you built a garage, and again, I'm just speculating again if we're talking about science fiction. I don't think that the second you build a garage, 5 years later, you're looking at repurposing that garage. I don't think that's going to be a scenario that's going to be something to think about.
Thank you.
I might have a little bit easier question. I know that people have a lot of concern with meters and what they would look like, but I love the idea of the RFID technology because it's so adjustable. These in-ground vehicle detection sensors, what do you think about them? What do you know about them? Because they seem quite intrusive to the landscape, and it just seems like it could be good technology for us.
It could be on some of our paved roads, and the issues that I run in, that I'm thinking of are that we don't mark our parking spaces, and a lot of these sensors are met with in the middle of a parking space, so there might be overlap or people parking in between them that you just don't get reliable data. Those are just concerns that I would have, and then you go into the cobblestone Belgian block areas and just how that actually gets implemented. I don't know. It gives you what you want. It gives you the data, real-time data, and that's obviously what you need. If there's another way of setting up a sensor that's not in street, that's probably the better way to go. They have other technologies, mostly relying on video cameras and sensing a vehicle pulling in and out. Technology's evolved now to where you can do traffic counts just by setting up a camera no bigger than what you'd have on your computer to Skype. And it reads the motions of vehicles. You can program it to read that. It's amazing how far technology has advanced. So something like that may be more applicable here, just because...
But still, it would not be detrimental to the landscape.
Exactly.
Of the historic district.
Yeah, you wouldn't notice it unless you really, really look for it.
But the other problem with those is they're expensive. They're expensive, and there's the setup cost and et cetera.
I mean, I'm anticipating that to institute a system like this, we're going to spend some money, but then
it was going to be $500,000 in Bar Harbor to institute it. It was about $500,000 for 300 and something spaces. So we've got 1,000 spaces if you instituted it, give or take, through the downtown, 9 something. So it'd be $1 million, give or take, if you had to guess.
For what system, Matt?
Well, for a demand management system, as they were going to do in Bar Harbor, and they were going to have kiosks and other things. One of the things to think about that's a real positive in the Nelson Nygaard is getting rid of the parking signs. You no longer run with you have a few half-hour spaces or whatever left, but the rest of it is, those signs are all gone. And it was, if you read through it, that's a huge benefit. Pull all those signs up. If we took all those signs out and we ended up with 6 or 8 kiosks, I wouldn't have a problem with that. I think that would be, I'd take that as a trade-off, as an aesthetic trade-off.
I'd be fine with that as well.
And maybe I'll get yelled at from some of my HDC friends, but, I think you have to make some trade-offs if you want to do it. And I think those signs would be great to get rid of.
I think at a bigger level, we still need to consider the hidden cost of free parking. What we think is free. Go downtown, we got a free hour, free 2 hours. It's not free, right? There's traffic jams, there's more emissions, right? That's not free. There's not enough turnover for businesses. It's not an economic driver. So that's the hidden, that cost we're trying to eliminate and put it towards this missing money towards, local services, on a bigger picture.
So, Madam Chair, I know Charlie wanted to speak as far representing the Civic League and give their points of view, but if you think that you're probably not in a position to pick a system right now, but if some direction or sense of the board you could provide for parking management, the spirit of a pricing mechanism, and perhaps you could sort that out and talk about it at a future meeting, and we could probably review the components of a permit that's been proposed to you versus a meter system, that was proposed 6-7 years ago, which is fairly ready to go. Matt keeps referencing the Nelson Nygaard study. That's basically everything you really need in order to implement that system. Some direction on whether to have a pricing system, and then whether we should be pursuing this parking benefit district acceptance, and then actually forming a parking benefit district if that passes. That's it. That's the direction we would seek from the board. And that said, I'd like to yield some time to Charlie if that's appropriate.
Madam Chair, can I add one more thing onto that?
Absolutely.
Would be who would run it, right? Whether we need a department, a parking supervisor, what would that cost? When would we do that? Would that be FY20, FY21? When can we implement someone to actually run it? Because I don't think you have the time to take care of it.
Not unless you want me to make the time to do it. Yeah.
Well, it kind of seemed to me like step 2 can run concurrently with step one, but technology is changing all the time, of getting authorization from town meeting to create this district. And then our next steps would be actually implementing it.
Designating the districts, the mission and the goals, and picking the entity that actually manages that fund. And that fund is something that needs to be figured out, whether it's an enterprise fund, a subsidized enterprise, whether it's a receipt reserve, or it just goes to the general fund. I mean, there's a lot of, you can really get into the weeds on talking with this. Again, first steps first. Do you want a pricing mechanism? The second step is, do you want to accept the idea of a benefit district? And if that passes, then you get into the weeds on figuring out the rest of the logistics.
Do we want to hear from Charlie and then think about
Thanks, Mike.
taking a vote on some of those items?
Thanks for this opportunity, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Charles Stott. I'm the co-president of the Nantucket Civic League. And we're working right now with a Worcester Polytech student team, and they're here this evening. And they've been interviewing a broad spectrum of stakeholders in the community. You'll hear more from them in December when they've completed their project. Civic League co-president Peter Morrison is working very closely with these students. And I'm here tonight to preview an exciting aspect of this team's efforts. They're aiming to document people's diverse views on parking and traffic congestion and what people feel should be done and why. For us at the Civic League, these in-depth interviews are very timely. They're just what we need to go forward. Peter and I, in the last year or so, have begun meeting with a variety of stakeholders to see if we can forge a consensus on solutions. And we can draw upon the WPI findings to identify areas of consensus among voters on what should be done and how to pay for it. We conducted a pilot survey of our membership with about 200 respondents recently. We wanted to follow up on that with a more focused survey of our entire 2,000 membership to identify if a consensus exists and to advance solutions that the voters would be likely to approve. Here's a taste of what these student interviews are surfacing. Clearly, there's an insufficient turnover of downtown parking spaces. Parking, and this is from interviews with people, parking should be free for the first 15 minutes, with paid parking thereafter. We need greater enforcement. Free parking has hidden costs, like people driving around causing congestion. And we've been ignoring a revenue source. Paid parking revenue should fund future parking projects or transportation alternatives. What's needed? Shuttles to bring people out of downtown upon exiting the ferry. Year-round bus service are two things that have been mentioned frequently. We're looking forward to understanding the spectrum of issues these interviews may surface in coming weeks. On behalf of the Nantucket Civic League, and with thanks to the WPI student team, we appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. Stay tuned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Love to hear from both of you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce Miller. I just wanted to echo a couple of things Matt said and maybe elaborate a little bit. Like Matt, I mean, this is something that I've been studying for 20 years, and it's been acutely frustrating that we've had such difficulty moving ahead with it. So I'm really encouraged by the tone of the discussion tonight. It sounds as if you're pretty close to deciding that it's time to move ahead. I was equally encouraged, I guess, a couple of weeks ago when I was at the meeting where you pretty much adopted the same approach to the year-round bus. It was like something we need to do. Let's decide to do it, and we can work on the details later. And I think if you adopt the same kind of thinking to this problem, you're going to discover that with all the advances in technology and the fact that so many people, as Charlie was just evidencing, now recognize that it's a problem that has to be dealt with, I think it's going to be a lot easier to achieve than we would have ever dreamed of 10 years ago. A couple of observations I would make is I think as you move forward, I think you have to be really careful with some of the semantics. Several times tonight, the term meters was used, and I think metered parking is not parking meters. Parking meters are going to scare a lot of people. Metered parking is what I think of as, I always use Easy Pass as my way to understand what we're talking about here. Everybody gets Easy Pass. Everybody would get Easy Park. And whether it's a sticker or whether it's a device that hangs from your windshield, they'll get that and they'll understand it, and they're used to dealing with it, and they know it works. The other thing we have to be careful about is the semantics of stickers. Several times over the years, and this literally goes back 20 years, we've talked about having a sticker that will allow you to park downtown. I think to settle for that now, when you're so close to the correct solution, to settle for a sticker would really be disappointing. A sticker is not going to really change anything. It's going to raise a little bit, it's going to raise probably a significant amount of money, but otherwise everything's going to be exactly the same. All it does is it's going to give you the privilege of coming into town and putting up with all the bad regulations and the chaos that we have now, but it won't change a thing. What will change something is if we have a smart sticker, which I gather is what has been described in this Vienna material, which is basically Easy Pass using a sticker instead of a thing that hangs from your windshield. I think the technology's there. I think the time's right, and I hope you will continue to pursue it. The only other thing I would say is I guess what brought this to a head was the discussion about the intermodal center. I think the concept of the intermodal center, including lots of parking places, is a great idea. It sounds as if you've engaged the services of a consultant to help evaluate it. I don't understand how anybody can evaluate the prospects of a parking lot without knowing in advance whether we're charging for parking or not. I mean, it's going to be an entirely different model. So I think prior to just making your decision about paid parking in a lot, in a paid lot, you're going to have decided whether you're embracing the broader idea of paid parking. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Dave Fredericks. I represent the group that put forward the idea behind the intermodal, but my comments are more as a taxpayer and somebody who's been studying this particular issue. And they're first off, I'm thrilled by the discussion. I think this is the best discussion we've had about this particular issue since I've been involved, which, like Matt, has probably been 20 years. I just have two observations. One, I think thinking about what you're trying to achieve and how you want to, what you're trying to get out of this, because two, this is a value proposition, right? And we can't lose sight of the fact it's going to add value, most of us believe, to the residents. We think it's going to add value to the people who come here, and it's going to provide funding to improve other things. And so I think spending that time on the front saying to people, we want to do this because we want to achieve the following, and we think we expect the following benefits. I think you need to, as you're doing this, just keep in mind that people want to understand what they're going to get for this change. And so having that clearly understood is critical. The other that Mike hasn't done, the only thing I thought he didn't do as good a job as he could have, and I think he knocked the ball out of the park. It was a home run derby. He won tonight. The other thing, though, was the data from something like a smart sticker. You get better at these programs because you collect data. We all think we know what parking is. We all think that the kids are going to help us, and they will. And Nelson did in their study. But if we get valuable, accurate data, then you have something to manage for the long term. So as you're putting together your program, think about those two ideas, if you would. Thank you.
And I think the data part is having a parking group that's dealing with the data. The data needs to be looked at and understood, and then the change is made, and that's something we would not. The selectmen wouldn't be able to do that, And one thing to remember is a lot of times, a lot of these places, the businesses are the ones who are against the parking. A lot of times the businesses, they don't think they'll park. They don't think their customers will have anywhere to park. They, oppose it, and a year or two later, the businesses are the biggest proponents of it, because they've seen the benefit, and they've seen, how much happier their employees are, how much busier they are, how much nicer the area is. It really, when you read a lot of this, when Dave's talking about what's the value becomes very clear. And I think that's important. When you look at some of the steps from the study from back in 2011, identify the issues we've done, explore solutions we've done. I think there's some things we have to sort of dig deeper into, like Mike's saying. There's some new technology. The third step was manage demand, which is what we're talking about now. Would be some sort of parking demand management program. The fourth step was enhanced supply. We've kind of already done number 4. Like, again, like Mike was saying, that was remote parking and shuttle program, identify locations with available parking outside of the downtown, use parking revenue to fund a free shuttle. Well, we didn't quite do that, and the shuttle, we went backwards a little this year, but that was number 4. And then number 5 was expand supply and do your garage. And it says, if the management program and supply enhancement does not solve the issues. So that's the 5th one. And so I think it should be concurrently. I believe we need to expand the supply. I believe it's something we need to do, but we need to do it smart. And I'm afraid that if we do number 5 and stick the bill with the taxpayers, then we won't maybe ever get to 3 and 4. So let's do 3 and 4 now. Let's do 3 now is sort of why I was pushing to have this conversation.
And that's what you were saying in the beginning, Rita. All the other places you looked at had paid parking first before they had a garage.
I think it's, I think, as Dave was saying, and Mike as well, but it'll just give us information that can be invaluable if and when we decide that the intermodal facility is what we want. We'll just have better information on what it needs to provide. And I think, again, in terms of figuring out pricing and making sure that if we do have one that it's fully utilized, it would make sense to have had some sort of parking demand management before that.
It was a recommendation from Desmond to Bar Harbor was that they institute it prior. And in their study, they said most communities that build parking garages do the on-street parking first. And I sort of predict that that's what we're going to get back from, on ours. And so we're sort of I'm thinking we need to jump the gun a little bit because we don't want to go to town meeting and ask for something and have it shot down because we didn't look at this. So I'm thinking this is why we should be doing this now.
And this has been looked at for a number of years, but it's, are we at a point where we're ready to take some more action? I was just going to say if we could talk maybe in line of these steps for a minute, talk about number 1 and get a sense of the board of if they do support a pricing mechanism and what type of pricing mechanism. I mean, I personally think that it probably is time to move in this direction, but I would like to see us go with the best technology available to us, which would be, I believe, some form of an easy pass or easy park that is just completely adjustable and gathers the data so that you can make changes over time. I don't know what everyone else thinks.
No, I guess I characterize it as embracing a parking management system, and I don't know if that's different from a pricing mechanism or if the pricing is an element of that. But and then I think we also should accept the MGL that you mentioned, and also establishing a parking commission. And I don't know if we're all ready to vote on all, and also the entity that will. The fund that will accept this revenue. I don't know if we're ready to make it. I'm comfortable with moving forward with a motion on all those things, but it's up to the rest of you to.
And I guess the question is, are we in a position where something could be ready for the annual town meeting?
Certainly accepting the MGL and the.
Madam Chairman, I would say, sure, accept the MGL because it just authorizes you to set it up. It doesn't necessarily set it up. And as to whether or not we're ready for those other things, I'm reading this for the first time today. And I haven't even talked to any staff about this, the people who are going to be running it, administering it in all likelihood, and setting it up. So I think we need some staff review of it.
Mm-hmm. That's why I'm more thinking in terms of step 1 and 2 tonight. Like, yes, maybe we're on board with some type of parking mechanism, and let's move forward with that first step of the authorization.
That needs to be explored and sort of costed out, because I don't see any costs in here at all.
Yes, this is not for implementation of the summer downtown 2018.
Right. So we're at the policy level.
Yes. So, right. Well,
yeah, I mean, I would be interested in a pilot program, but it's probably not going to happen.
It could be done on one of the parking lots, perhaps.
Exactly. You could maybe do that.
We could start trying out maybe some of the technology. I'm not sure. We probably won't get there. It's probably too aggressive.
So I'll throw this out there. The board embraces a parking management system using the highest and best technology available. Is that?
Well, I wrote something that I can give you the key points, and that's the first
Okay.
one. I move the Town Institute a Parking Management Program based upon demand management principles. I reference Nelson Nygaard, charging fair market prices for on-street, lot, and overnight commercial parking. And that's one of the things we'd have to buff up. Create a transportation and parking commission, create a parking and benefit district, create a parking fund with funds earmarked for public improvements in the district, including but not limited to improved NRTA service, parking garage, alternative transportation, operating as a self-sufficient fund, setting policy and pricing to require no taxpayer subsidies, and if required, issue an RFP to hire an independent consultant accountable for the board to design it, estimate parking demand with or without a downtown garage, recommend required hardware and software, model budgets, review and comment on previous ongoing studies as required, and generally make recommendations in the best long-term interest of the town. And further, in order to objectively do this, the consulting services be paid for by the town, if that's required. I'm not sure that the second part is even required.
Did you write that? Or is that from the Nelson?
No, I wrote.
Okay.
I actually
Sounds pretty good.
I
I'll
was
second
writing-
that. I will second
But
that.
I can
That was
send
a
that.
lot.
We don't have to
No,
vote
no.
that tonight. I can send that.
Okay, well.
I'll email it to you. Yeah, and you can vote it next week if you want me to email it. So.
Well, why not vote it tonight?
Could you
Well, I feel better.
say it
I feel
again
better if
then,
you all saw
slower?
it.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
There's a
Or
lot
pare
in
it
there.
down.
And I think also in terms, because I think Jim's point, which wasn't in there, I don't think, just availing of the best technology that we have available to us.
This is a draft, so I made a draft if you wanted to change it. So I'll send that out and we
And,
can.
I'm sorry, I
And we
don't
want
want to
input
be a
from
wet
Lou.
blanket about anything, but the best technology available to us does, with regard to cost?
Well, those are all, I mean,
No, that would be a fact.
we're just the policy wonks here.
I know.
You can figure out how we,
Well, I feel like
I
available
knew
to
that was
us
coming.
has a cost element to it.
figure it out.
So if it's totally unreasonable, we can't
Right.
be sort of shooting for the stars if it's too expensive. So I think
It would be a pricing mechanism that would make sense for Nantucket.
There you go.
I mean,
There's your
I'm getting
answer.
the sense of the board that we are probably more interested in a higher level of technology that gathers more data than in everyone just buying a sticker.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
maybe it is a sticker, but it has RFID in it.
Smart sticker.
Well, and if you look at the Nelson Nygaard, the residents were going to get a benefit. So the residents were going to be able to park in places other people couldn't. They were going to pay, they paid a little less for the parking in certain areas. If we wanted to tie it into the parking lot out here, the residents could maybe potentially park here and take the NRTA for free if we were making enough money. So there are things like Dave was saying, people have to understand what the benefit is to them.
Yeah.
Those would be some of the benefits that you could put into the system if it had enough, if it was robust enough and it was proper.
all good.
So do we want to come back and do
I think we
another
should.
version of that?
Yeah.
Or do you need a motion now for something specific?
It's up to you all. I just didn't catch that whole thing, and
I didn't either.
Yeah.
heard something
I'll send it
about.
again.
I would say we could expand on that, but maybe we could do something a little bit more simplified about just for the annual of moving forward with getting authorization for a parking benefits district.
That sounds good.
Okay.
We can bring back up some further
Okay.
detailed discussion and motions. Is that
Yeah.
reasonable?
Can we couch it in we're, embracing a parking management system and beginning the implementation of this, whatever that is, so I'd make that, I don't know if that's a motion, but.
Second.
Move.
Second.
Okay, all right.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I'm sure there's going to be more
Yeah,
public
it's good.
input on this. Okay, moving on. Committee reports. Anybody?
Nope. I have nothing.
To adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I can't talk about flying cars. By 2020, I read
Is that
today,
a
they're going to
committee
be,
report?
they're going to be flying cars in LA that are Uber cars.
Before you technically adjourn, can you guys repeat what that last motion was? Because we need it for the minutes.
So it was a motion to embrace the concept of a parking management system and to add the acceptance of a development of a parking, what do you call it, district?
Parking benefits district for the annual
For the
town
annual
meeting.
town meeting.
For authorization.
Okay. Thank you.
All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.